everybody. So today we are going to be talking about transit Venus turning retrograde. And this will be going on in the signs of Pisces and Aries. The Venus retrograde period will start on March 1st of 2025 through April 12th of 2025. I'm looking at my notes. If you're wondering why the hell is she looking down, that's what I'm doing. My notes, my dates for things so I don't fuck them up. Now, when a planet is retrograde, there is a pre-retrograde shadow period before it turns retrograde, and then a post-retrograde shadow after it turns retrograde, after it turns direct, excuse me. The pre-shadow period started in late January of 2025. So right now, as I'm filming this in late February, we are in the pre-shadow period. And when I upload this video, I'm not sure exactly when I will, but when I upload it, when you're watching this, when it's uploaded for the first time, will still be in the pre-shadow period. And then the post-shadow will end on May 16th of 2025. So the whole thing, pre-shadow, retrograde period, post-shadow, the whole thing is almost 4 months in total, just about. Now, since I'm talking about transits or a transiting planet, right? I want you to keep this in mind. You really do have to look at what these transiting planets or what a transiting planet is doing to your natal chart. You really, really do. So if you, I can't stress that enough. You want to, because, you know, certain transits will impact some people much more heavily than others. We all come under the collective influence when a planet turns retrograde or things like, I mean, we all come under that influence, but it really, really depends on what a transiting planet is doing to your natal chart as to how it plays out for you, the energy involved for you personally. So I encourage you to look at transit Venus retrograde, what it's doing to your natal chart. And if you need some help with this, I'd be happy to read for you if you would like me to. I will put the link below where you can have me read for you, where you can get a reading with me. Link in the description box below or above. I don't even know where the description box is, but the place to get a reading from me will be there, the link. Also, if you are interested in really, really learning the language of astrology, really, really learning it, I cannot recommend the star cards enough. I really, really can't. I will put the link in the description box as well where they can be found, because they've been called a missing piece. I've had multiple people call them that to their astrological learning journey. I wish when I had first started learning this a long, long time ago, that there had been something like this, because you can like visually lay out the stuff, lay out the cards to learn. And a lot of people that are drawn to astrology are visual people. I know that I am. I know that I'm not the only one. So actually being able to lay these things out, these pieces of the chart out, it's just a really cool way to learn. Can't recommend them enough. Again, the link will be in the description box to check them out further, purchase them, whatever, along with getting some sort of a reading from me if you would like one. Okay, so back to Venus retrograde in Aries and Pisces. First, let's talk a little bit about retrograde energy in general. What is retrograde? What is retrograde energy? What does that mean? Okay. When a planet is retrograde, it means it functions differently. It will function differently. And stuff that's different can be really scary to the masses. That's why I think you get so much fucking fear-mongering and shit around Mercury retrograde periods and that kind of shit. Which drives me crazy. It really, really does. You know, can technology or, you know, communication, shit like that, can it get fucked up under a Mercury retrograde period? Absolutely. Is it this big bad wolf that everybody acts like it is? No, it's not. And the same thing kind of happens, the same kind of boogeyman, big bad wolf bullshit tends to come up with other retrograde planets too. Mercury is just a planet that goes, you know, retrograde 3, sometimes 4 times a year. Every once in a while it'll be 4 times a year. Venus is a planet that turns retrograde the least often. So, but, retrograde planets in general, they tend to get like this boogeyman, big bad wolf reputation, especially within pop astrology on social media. I won't even get started on that. That drives me fucking crazy. Because really what it is they just function differently. But we need things that function differently. We need people that function differently. We need this. We need this. Not only so things progress and change and move forward, but also because it'd be fucking boring. It would be so fucking boring if we didn't have difference. If we didn't have this, it would be so boring. So retrograde planets do need to function differently. They turn that planetary energy inward. The planetary energy goes inward. And I also believe that it is spiritualized and it is personalized, more personalized. Now that sounds weird because planets are personal, right? Like in a natal chart, all of your planets, right? Even the outer planets, some people want to say those aren't personal planets. They're not personal planets in the traditional way that you would think of it, but all of the planets in your chart are personal to you. Like they all are. So, but I do think that because of the turning inward that retrograde energy does, it will personalize it even further. And before that retrograde energy can come out, it has to be internalized first. So that's like how retrograde energy functions. It's also like a callback. In transit, it can be a callback to things from the past. Now, in saying that, I'm going to throw this date out. The last time transit Venus was retrograde in Aries and Pisces was in March, April of 2017. It was actually around the same time. I think it was instead of starting at the beginning, very, very beginning of March, I think it was like March 6th or something. I didn't write down the exact dates, but it was March through April of 2017. So I would think back, if I were you, I would think back to what was going on in your life at that time, because that could give you an idea as to what themes might come up again this time around. What might happen for you. Not the exact same thing, right? Because other transits are going to be going on too that weren't going on then. But it is an exercise to think about. You could also take this collectively, what was going on in the world at the time. We might see themes repeating, going back, a call back. It's possible. I didn't go too much into the history on this, but y'all could do that. If you have any ideas in the comments, by all means, leave them in the comments. But yeah, so that's kind of what you're looking at when Venus, or when a planet in general is retrograde. Specifically though, Venus retrograde, that was the last time Venus was retrograde in Aries and Pisces. Now the last time Venus was retrograde in general was July of 2023. I remember that because I actually did a video about that. For some reason I have a vivid memory of doing that video. Whatever. So when Venus turns retrograde, this is a good time to think about things that Venus wants to express, right? Venus is a planet. So Venus is what energy is wanting to be expressed, needing to be expressed. Planets are what energy needs to be expressed, wants to be expressed, should be expressed, whatever. The sign is how energy is expressed. And then the houses, which we're not going to mess with in this video, but the house is where or areas of life that energy is expressed through. So Venus is a planet. Venus is a what? So what does Venus want to express? Things like values. Values, that's Venus territory. Love. Love is Venus territory. What one loves. What one needs to feel loved. Why? Expressions of love. These kinds of things. Beauty, harmony, aesthetics. All of these kinds of things. These are all Venusian concepts. When relationships, that's a big one. Venus retrograde period is a big one for relationships. But Venus in general is, relationships, relational energy. Venus wants to express relationship stuff. Now, when Venus goes retrograde in the sky, there is a collective need to turn all of that energy inward. So things like really going inward and considering the relationships that you have. This is what, Venus retrograde periods, people talk about relationships ending. Things like that happening under Venus RX periods. Yes, this does happen. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to happen to you, so don't let it scare you. But it is a common thing because people are kind of collectively pulled to go inward and consider relationships, what kind of relationship they actually want to have in their life and what they don't. And relationship here, oftentimes we're talking about romantic relationships, but this could easily be other sorts of relationships too. Other sorts of relationships where love is involved. It doesn't just have to be romantic relationships, though oftentimes it is. But it's a time for people to go inward and think about these kinds of things. What kind of relationship do they actually want? Values. What do they actually value? Not because they've been told to value it, because there is, the consensus values it, the collective values it, but what does the person actually value? What does the individual actually value? And self-worth, self-value. This is also a Venus thing. But when it's retrograde, that self-worth and self-value is so important. It is so absolutely important. In a natal chart, if you've got Venus retrograde in your natal chart, I cannot fucking stress how important self-value is for you. Like really, there can be issues with self-value, self-worth when you see Venus retrograde in a natal chart. And it can be huge. When it goes retrograde in transit, we all kind of come under this influence of self-worth, self-value being very, very important to go inward and think about, consider. What do we actually value about ourselves? Is it what other people value about us? Sometimes it's not. Oftentimes it's not. And we have to be okay with that. That's actually when Venus is retrograde in a natal chart, that's kind of a big deal. Oftentimes the person will value things about themselves that other people do not value about them. And what will happen is that person will find that other people value, people outside of them will value things about them that they don't. So it can be like, why don't you value about me what I value about me? I think, and when Venus goes retrograde in transit, we can all kind of come under this influence, right? This influence of trying to figure this out. And making sure that our values are really our values too. Self-worth is a huge part of this, but also making sure that the things that we value, do we really value them? Or have we just been kind of conditioned to think that we should? Same thing with beauty. What do we find beautiful? And is it actually what's beautiful to us? Or is there some sort of conditioning thing going on, All of this stuff comes into play. We all come under this influence. Now, so it's going to start out retrograde in Aries. And then it'll move back into Pisces. And then I think it's 24 degrees Pisces, I think, that it stations direct. And it'll move forward again. Now, Venus in Aries, Venus retrograde. Okay, let me also say this. Venus is, I have videos about this. I think I've got a blog post about this. I don't know. But when I see retrograde planets, I think of their domicile and detriment placements as flipped. So Venus direct is at home or domicile in Libra, along with Taurus, because Venus is the ruler of both Libra and Taurus. So it is in detriment in Aries and in Scorpio. This is Venus direct. Now, when I see Venus retrograde, I actually think of it as more at home in Aries and more in detriment in Libra. Now, the reason for that is Aries energy is self-focused, not necessarily selfish, it can be, but self-focused, meaning that Venus retrograde energy that goes inward, that needs to go inward within the self to figure out values, self-value, self-worth, relationships, all of this. I feel like it functions well in Aries, or it has the capacity to function well in Aries. Now, on the other hand, we have Venus and Pisces, right, where it will end up going. Venus is exalted. Venus direct is exalted in Pisces, which means it's strong. It's very strong. It's exaggerated. And it is in fall in Virgo. Now, I really feel like this can be flipped too. I play around more. I've done more research, more playing around with clients and people that I know and everything with the domicile and detriment planets of domicile and detriment placements, of the planets with the retrograde energy and flipping it. But I think the same thing can be said about the exaltation and fall. Meaning, going with that, Venus retrograde would actually have a more difficult time in Pisces, where it is exalted. So we're going from something that seems, a little bit easier to something that seems like a little bit more difficult. And I think a lot of that has to do with, going inward within the self, the Venus, taking Venus retrograde, going inward, thinking about what actually works for the person and, within relationships, what kind of relationships they need, what kind of values they have, what they actually love, all of that. And then, but surrounding all of this in Aries, I'll say this. Surrounding all of this in Aries, there could be some anger involved. Some anger, especially, if you go inward and you realize, which could be the case for some people, like, damn it, the things I've been valuing are not actually things I value. Whether this just be values or self-worth and self-value. You might have, but this isn't a bad thing. But there might be some anger involved in this, or some passion involved in this, right? There really could be, because Aries energy is passionate. It can be angry. It's very, individuated. It is instinct. It is impulse. It is independent. All of these kinds of things. Taking action, So there's like going inward with these values, with what you value, with self-worth, self-value, relationship stuff, all of that, taking an active approach to this going inward, right? But there could be some anger that comes up about this. Some anger that, why have I allowed stuff in my relationship to go on? Why do I even want that in the first place? Especially if you haven't been treated very well, say, or there are things that need to be fixed in it, right? Maybe it's not that the relationship needs to end or anything. Maybe it's just that things need to be fixed, reconfigured, adjusted. That's always possible too. And things like self-worth and self-value. If you don't feel like you have been valuing yourself the way that you should be, or you don't feel that other people have been, or what have you, that could cause some anger. It really could. It's necessary, but it could. It definitely could. And then when it moves into Pisces, the difficult part to me when Venus retrograde moves into Pisces has a lot to do with, Pisces energy isn't always the clearest. It's not always the clearest of the bunch. It can sometimes lack that clarity. But when it is able to be clear, Pisces energy, I think, also wants to be fluid. It wants to release all of this. And so Pisces energy is also very sensitive. It is emotional. Pisces energy is emotional. Oftentimes it's a little bit more of a detached sort of emotion, not detached like Aquarius, but it's just so like, it's very fluid. It lacks shape. That there can be kind of a detachment to it, but Pisces energy feels things incredibly deeply. It does. And sometimes the feeling is unconscious. And I feel like with this Venus retrograde period, the Pisces, like once some of the, anger, taking action that one does internally on these Venusian issues comes up, then it's like, what do you do about it? When it's in Pisces, needing to see it clearly, right? Needing to actually see it clearly. Needing to release it, allow it to flow through and flow out, which for some people is the most difficult part. Yeah, for some people that is the most difficult part, just letting that actually come through. I got some kind of weird notification on my phone. So all of these things, are coming about here soon. When Venus is retrograde, I also want to say this. Venus retrograde, this is a really good time for self-care. Especially things that this is kind of a little bit more generic, but I wouldn't, when I say self-care, maybe don't do like any sort of alteration kind of self-care on yourself under Venus retrograde periods. There can be some, it's generic, but it's worth saying because it is something that people do report happening, like if they say want to change their hair or want to go get some sort of something done to their face or whatever the case might be. Sometimes it doesn't always turn out the way the person wants when they do it under a Venus retrograde period. So maybe wait to do any sort of alterations, but other forms of self-care are really, really good. It's a really very good idea. As far as relationships go, another kind of generic thing to mention is relationships, people coming back from the dead. It's definitely something that does happen. Whether or not you want to allow those people to come back from the dead is absolutely your choice. But just remember, they are dead for a reason. Keep that in mind. Another thing that this might bring up, not even these people like coming back from the dead and like making themselves known in your life or whatever. But with the Aries, Venus retrograde in Aries, in like the anger thing, you could find yourself in a position where you are considering past relationships and what pissed you off about them. or something could trigger anger about them. That is definitely possible. And then once that Venus retrograde moves into Pisces, it's like releasing it. If we are talking about something past, and I'll tell you this. Personally, this is very relevant for me. There are definitely, and it's very relevant not only because of this transit coming up, but because things going on in my life right now. There are definitely things going on where I am, and it's not even retrograde yet, but I am really like pissed as fuck about things that have happened. Not recent things, but things from the past, especially the past from last time this was retrograde in Venus retrograde in Aries and Pisces in 2017. Woo! There are things that I'm like, yep. So that's not going to be the case for everybody, but there could be things that come up during the Venus retrograde period where you are kind of called to examine relationships that you've had, what pissed you off about them, or even to get pissed off about what happened. You know, and then actually release it, you know, or try. I know that that's easier said than done, but actually trying to like let it disperse, let it go out during the Venus Retrograde in Pisces part. I'm trying to think if there was anything else I want to say about this. Definitely, one other thing. I know I mentioned already, like making sure to take a personal approach to this. To your, you know, make sure to look at it in your own chart for sure, what it's doing in your own chart. But you can also look at like what house it's going to fall in, or what it's falling in, what house it is transiting. That might give you an idea as to areas of life that that might be affected by this particular transit. Yeah, but definitely focus on, try if you can, focus on self-worth, self-value. Consider relationship things, what you really want, what you've had before in the past, why it didn't work, what could have done differently, what could have been done differently, what you could have done differently, what somebody else could have done differently. And while you can't control what somebody else does, you can know what to look for in the future, kind of thing. About love, what you love, what do you actually love, what do you actually need to feel loved. Also important things to consider under these periods. Anyway, I'm going to head off because it is really, really cold. You can see my breath like as I'm talking probably. It's very cold here in Austin. It's been cold here the past few days. But if you would like me to read for you, again, I will put the link in the description box, wherever it is on this video. Please leave your comments, thoughts, all of that. I love hearing from you all. I love hearing what y'all have to say and responding and stuff. Y'all are fun. And yeah, I will see you all later.